Walus on parole in 2 weeks' time. The Polish immigrant is serving a life sentence for killing SACP leader Chris Hani in April 1993. It was an Easter Sunday. For more on the High Court's decision to release Janusz Walus on parole, we are joined in studio by the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Advocate Michael Masutha. It's so good to have you. Welcome to the programme.
Good morning, Leanne, and to the viewers.
So what we've heard from your office is that you're going to study the judgment and decide whether or not you're going to appeal.
Yes, we are busy studying the judgment, and my team is looking at various aspects thereof, and that would assist us in making a determination in that regard.
Yeah. Are you likely to appeal?
Most likely, and I'll tell you why. Core to the reason for our decision and subsequent basis for defending the decision in court was that when we took office, we decided that the criminal justice system over time has pushed the victim to the periphery of the system, and we have a focused and dedicated effort to restore the rightful place of the victim, and that is at the center of the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
And as a result, since the Eugene de Kock decision, which was the very first decision we had to make, which also revolved around victim participation, where we initially had rejected his application purely on those grounds, primarily on those grounds, we have since not considered a single parole application where there is no evidence of some effort of engaging victims. And this is a principle we intend to defend and we intend to advance. So the entire criminal justice system is being reviewed to look at in what way can we enhance the participation, active participation, and support of victims in the system.
Yeah. Let's talk about life sentences here in South Africa, because as we keep noting, at the time Janusz Walus and Clive Derby-Lewis were sentenced to death for the assassination of Chris Hani. At that time, it was overruled. The death penalty was no longer part of the justice system, and it was turned into a life sentence. As far as we know, Janusz Walus is perfectly healthy. There's no signs that he needs to be out on a medical parole. He served 22 years. What does life sentence mean in South Africa? It confuses a lot of people, and I think a lot of people are asking that question now.
Life sentence means life sentence. 25 years means 25 years. However, ordinarily, if you are sentenced for a determinate period, say 25 years, you would serve half of that sentence, whereafter you would be entitled to be considered for parole. And parole simply means serving the rest of your sentence outside of a correctional facility. It does not mean the end of your sentence. And it is essentially a privilege because it's based on merit. If you do not show merit for placement on parole, we simply reject your application until such time as you've convinced us that you indeed deserve parole. And equally, if you go and break the conditions, we can take you back.
Yeah.
As far as lifers are concerned, the current law is that ordinarily once you've done 20 years, it's going to go up to 25 years, and I don't want to go into the detail of that. You are entitled to be considered, again on the same basis. Now there's a number of factors that we take into consideration. Primary to those factors is how you have responded to corrective measures that we would have put in place on your offending behavior. So your attitudinal change, whether you have achieved anger management skills, and issues like that. But another critical aspect is ensuring that there is victim-offender dialogue, so as to ensure that the victim also feels included, part of the process, and of course in the process, hopefully, bring healing to the victim, because very often the victim is left behind 20 years down the line, nothing has happened to them. The offender has been through rehabilitation and he's a changed person, but the victim is left where they were left 20 years ago.
I mean, we look at reactions to yesterday as well, and we talk about, let's just take the PAC for instance. I mean, they have still got political prisoners being incarcerated since the apartheid days. They're still there. They're watching on in almost disbelief. The fact that an individual like Janusz Walus, who has never really come out and never told the truth, that is now eligible for parole, and yet there are still many political prisoners that are still languishing in our prisons now. What is your response to that? How do you balance a justice system in such a way?
You would recall talking about political prisons that back in 2007, the then president sought to introduce presidential pardon that would target specifically political prisoners. That resulted in about 2,000 applications being received, and a multi-party reference group was established to distill that, and we ended up with about 149. Now, when we took office, we made every effort to make sure that anybody of the 149 that was still in our facilities was fast-tracked through the parole system if they actually met the criteria to be placed on parole. We have completed that exercise. I think there was about 9 people who did not qualify because they had not met the threshold in terms of the minimum period for which they must serve their sentences. The remaining 2,000, we're scanning through the entire list, making sure in the current phase that anybody who is in prison for political grounds or something of that nature and qualify for parole are actually fast-tracked. Let me highlight the fact that we do have administrative inefficiencies that we've inherited, and we've put together a team that is reviewing the entire parole system administratively, but also looking at the policy and legislative framework.
Okay. Just finally, there's also there's Dimpo Hani, who has launched a scathing criticism on the judge. The judge almost talking to Dimpo last week, saying that she must now forgive and move on. Is she justified in giving this criticism towards the judge?
I don't think it would be appropriate of me to go into those kind of details in the proceedings. Certainly, I think that a point does need to be made, that a distinction needs to be made between parole and other forms through which people can be released, like presidential pardon, for example, where the president can take political considerations into account. With parole, you look at whether the offender has actually responded according to our criteria of rehabilitation and correction, and you make that decision, and part of that is for the offender to acknowledge a responsibility and to work with the victim in order to bring closure to the matter.
Okay. All right, Minister, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much for coming in and talking to us. We'll wait. I know you've given yourself 2 weeks. That's, of course, at the same time that the parole is up, so we'll have to see what happens. Michael Masutha, Justice and Correctional Services Minister, talking to us about the parole handed down to Janusz Walus yesterday. Let's take a break. We'll be a little bit late for news headlines, but they'll be directly after this. Stay tuned.